Hello everyone, I'm Lucy, Scientific Ambassador of AE Space. Starting today, I will be releasing a new video every week, with the theme of ether. Because this is an extremely large topic, it can be said that ether is related to the most basic logic of modern scientific development, and it is also the essence of free energy technology. The importance of knowledge and information about the ether cannot be overstated, and this information is very scarce and difficult to find. Therefore, I decided to present it episode by episode in a video, to try to tell the whole story. The name ether is familiar to everyone, because it appears in the information we receive in a very strange sense. On the one hand, from the perspective of mainstream science, the ether seems to be a discredited thing. The famous Michelson Morley experiment did not detect the existence of the ether, so mainstream science calls the ether hypothesis pseudoscience. On the other hand, ether also appears in various fantasy, science fiction, and magic-themed novels, becoming a synonym for the original power of the world. And in our real life, the most famous ether is the Ethereum. God V, nickname for Vitalik Buterin, called the cryptocurrency he created ether, which is enough to show his ambition. But what is ether? Put simply, the ether is a substance that is ubiquitous in the universe. It is the most primitive thing that forms our physical world and is the physical medium that supports the propagation of light. As early as the time of the ancient Greeks, Aristotle hypothesized the existence of an ether, and until the beginning of the 20th century, almost all physicists took it for granted. Because both classical optics and Maxwell's electromagnetic wave theory imply the concept of an ether. If there were no fundamental medium in the universe, all these theories would be meaningless. For example, Maxwell believed that the ether was a fluid that filled all space. After he proposed the electromagnetic wave theory, he suggested that the speed of light may depend on the speed of the ether. Maxwell was the most authoritative figure in physics at the time, so his hypothesis prompted physicists to conduct experiments to verify it. However, the famous experiment conducted by American physicists Albert Michelson and Edward Morley failed. This famous failed experiment in the history of science was based on the assumption that the ether is stationary in space, and the Earth travels through it. Therefore, it was assumed that the Earth, in its motion around the Sun, must pass through the stationary ether. And because of the Earth's movement, there must be a constant ether wind blowing past the Earth. Light emitted in the direction of the Earth's movement should travel faster than light emitted at right angles to the Earth. The two beams of light should be out of phase and show interference fringes. Albert Michelson's first experiment in 1881 showed no interference fringes. And neither did his second, more complex experiment in 1887. This means that the two beams of light have the same speed and are not affected by the wind of the ether. This experiment is widely interpreted by mainstream modern physics as meaning that the ether does not exist. And this is where most people's current ignorance of the ether comes from. In fact, at the time, that is, after Maxwell's failed experiment, no one suggested that the ether might not exist at all. Their experiments merely proved the non-existence of the ether wind. That is to say, the ether is not like still air. And movement in the ether does not produce an effect like wind. In fact, since the Victorian era, the scientific community has generally accepted the existence of ether. The reason is simple. As the British physicist Sir Oliver Lodge said, if the light waves emitted from the sun has existed in space for 8 minutes before reaching our eyes, then there must be a medium in space in which the light waves travel. We cannot have waves unless they are the waves of something. Sir Oliver Lodge said that the ether is not something ethereal, but is treated as a substance with determinable physical properties. As to why the ether was not captured in the Michelson-Morley's experiment, Sir Oliver Lodge explained that we cannot catch the ether mechanically. We cannot catch it or move it in the usual way. We can only obtain it through electricity. This is a very wise saying, and remembering it will be the key to solving the mystery. In fact, not only did Lord Rayleigh offer an explanation for the failed experiment, but so did physicist George Fitzgerald. He said that objects moving in the ether would shrink in size in relation to each other. The Dutch physicist Hendrik Lorentz and the French mathematician Henri Poincaré later developed this idea into a complete theory. This is the famous Lorentz relativity principle, also known as Lorentz transformation. He asserted that no experiment could detect the motion of an observer through the ether, because the observer would be compressed with the ether's compression and stretched with its stretching. Does this sound familiar? Does it remind you of anything? Yes, doesn't Einstein's theory of relativity also have something to do with the relationship between speed and physical size? He said that the faster the speed, the shorter the size, which is the so-called relativistic length contraction effect. Isn't this the content of special relativity? Well, you heard it right, the principle of relativity was not invented by Einstein, it already existed before him. In fact, the first person to propose the theory of relativity was Galileo. Galileo said that in all reference frames at rest or moving at a constant speed, the laws of physics remain the same. So when we see a carriage moving at a constant speed, the water in the cup stays still. Not to mention that we witnessed the greatness of Einstein's theory of relativity, because Galileo was the first to propose the principles of relativity. However, Galileo's theory of relativity could not explain the speed of light. According to Einstein's equations, the speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. It seems that the speed of light is constant, so there is Lorentz's theory of relativity, which is based on the ether. During this period, the scientific community generally recognized that the ether was not an absolutely still medium independent of time and space, so it could not be detected using the experimental method of Max Born, and a more complex model was needed. However, something happened soon afterwards, and from this event onwards, the world of physics was drawn by an inexplicable force, completely burying the ether under the edifice of science. This event was the birth of Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein's special theory of relativity is based on Lorentz transformations, which is almost a replica of Lorentz's theory of relativity. The only difference is that Einstein proposed the principle of the constancy of the speed of light. Please note that Lorentz's speed of light is the relative speed in the ether. Because the observer is in the ether, so the speed of light cannot be measured. However, Einstein's speed of light is the absolute speed. He said that light in a vacuum is always 300,000 kilometers per second, regardless of the reference system. Incidentally, in fact, in the scientific community, many people believe that Einstein plagiarized the principle of relativity, including the famous intelligent equation E equals mc squared, which is not from his hand. As early as 1903, that is, 2 years before Einstein published his theory of special relativity, Italian industrialist, physicist and geologist Olinto di Pretto published the intelligent equation in his book The Ether Hypothesis in the Life of the Universe. And in 1905, when Einstein proposed special relativity, although he did not refute the concept of ether, he replaced it with the concept of field. In general theory of relativity, Einstein directly introduced the concept of spacetime and included the entire spacetime in the gravitational field. This is undoubtedly a kind of self-deception, because any field is only the excitation of the underlying physical medium, and there can be no field without the underlying physical medium. That said, Einstein himself was always wavering in his opinion about the ether. In his essay Relativity, a Sketch, Einstein wrote that there are weighty arguments in favor of the ether hypothesis, and to deny its existence is to assume that the vacuum has no physical properties. The basic facts of is inconsistent with this view. According to general relativity, space is endowed with physical properties. So in this sense there is an ether. According to general relativity, space without an ether is inconceivable. But Einstein then says that, when it comes to the quantized nature of light, by assuming that light propagates in quanta and therefore has particle-like properties, and not just being a wave that needs some material to fluctuate, he eliminates the unnecessary ether. The above is widely known thanks to the famous science fiction writer Isaac Asimov. So it seems that people only remember Einstein's denial of the ether. The most important contribution to the debate on the ether seems to have come from an Italian, Professor Marco Todeschinih, Dean of the Physics Section of the Accademia dei Lincei. In March 19, Marco Todeschinih 1956, at the 25th International Conference of the American Physical Society, scientist Oppenheimer revealed the behavior of antiparticles and subatomic phenomena, the emergence of which was in sharp conflict with Einstein's theory of relativity. Therefore, Professor Todeschini said that, in line with Galileo's views, a return to classical physics was necessary, and that what had been discovered in the universe was Galileo's theory of relativity, not Einstein's theory of relativity. In response to Maxwell's failed ether experiment, Professor Todeschini gave his explanation. He said that there is a static ether throughout the universe, but that near the Earth it moves with the Earth in its revolution and rotation. Todeschini postulated a fluid space with a constant density, rather than the weightless ether that physics had hitherto assumed. According to this theory, it can be shown that the Sun is at the center of a huge rotating space fluid field, which is subdivided like an onion into many concentric layers of constant thickness, each of which rotates at a decreasing speed with increasing distance. According to Todeschini's theory, it can also be concluded that the Earth is at the center of a similar, smaller rotating field, at the periphery of the larger rotating field of the Sun. Todeschini conducted numerous tests to support his claim. Returning to the Michelson experiment, Todeschini pointed out that the experiment was based on the assumption that the ether was stationary throughout the universe. However, he says, I have demonstrated that our planet, in its orbit, drags the etheric medium around it, as if it were carrying its air blanket. This leads us to believe that the Earth is at the center of an etheric planet, carrying all the ether of its immediate surroundings. It is precisely on the basis of Sir Arthur Lister, as well as Professor Todeschini, and many other scientists, have pointed to a huge scientific error, which has led to erroneous conclusions in contemporary physics. Professor Todeschini pointed out that many new experimental results have disproved the assumption of the constancy of the speed of light, which has been the basis of physical theory since 1905, and convinced us that this theory does not correspond to physical reality. The contraction of objects and the expansion of time that form the basis of Einstein's theory of relativity is based on the contraction of objects and the expansion of time, which does not occur in natural reality at all. In fact, they were assumed based on erroneous physical interpretations of astronomical differences and the Michelson experiment. But it was also this period, with the continuous shift of the mainstream physics discourse, the ether was gradually forgotten and became an outdated and discredited physical concept that was abandoned. However, with the further development, people naturally discovered that the vacuum of the universe is not a space with nothing in it. On the contrary, it is the stage for intense physical processes. People have observed that the vacuum is full of long falls of energy, the birth and disappearance of virtual particle pairs in the vacuum, and the interaction between the vacuum and particles. So people have come up with terms like physical vacuum and vacuum structure, which are very confusing, while continuing talking about a vacuum, while also saying that there are virtual particles and structures. I believe most people don't understand what this means. So some people say that the universe is born out of nothing, as if energy can really be born from nothing and return to nothing. In fact, all of this, including the so-called spacetime, gravitational field, sea of energy, vacuum structure, etc., all proves that the so-called vacuum is a physical medium, which is the ether. Therefore, although Michael Morley's experiment failed, it does not mean that the ether does not exist, it is just that their method was wrong. In subsequent various physical theories, while either it be relativity, quantum mechanics, or the standard particle model, have repeatedly proven the existence of the ether. Theoretical physics cannot ignore it, so they can only stubbornly call it the vacuum. In fact, British quantum physicist Paul Dirac said, "The assumption of a physical theory without ether may have reached its end. We see new hope for the future in the ether." Dirac mathematically demonstrated the actual existence of the ether at the University of Cambridge. At this point, then, we have only begun to scratch the surface of the question of the ether, because the above debate on the existence of the ether has been a major one. The above debates on the existence of the ether are mainly theoretical. In fact, if this is the case, the theory of the ether, like relativity and even string theory, is only a hypothesis. Remember what Sir Oliver Lodge said earlier? We can't capture the ether mechanically, we can only get it electrically. This statement will be proved true in the future. The man who actually captured the ether through electrical means was the legendary Nikola Tesla. We'll see you next time.